firm produce here? I'm hearing whisperings of no, which is the exact right thing to whisper right now. Why is that? Because price at this output level is less than average variable cost, so the firm should shut down. So this price 1 right here that I'm about to put up, that's not good, let's try that again. This price right here, P1, sorry, let's do P3, thank you. This price P3 right here is the point where price is exactly equal to average variable cost, and where price is also exactly equal to marginal cost. So at this price right here, the firm should produce Q3 units, and it's indifferent between operating or shutting down. So at prices lower than P3, the firm shuts down. At prices above P3, the firm produces according to where price is equal to marginal cost. So here it comes, right? This is like in Harry Potter, the first time you actually see the phoenix, right? We're ready for our supply curve. Because what I've got now is, at any given price, what's the firm's optimal quantity produced? Well, at any given price, if that price is above P3, the optimal quantity produced is governed by the marginal cost curve. So the firm's supply curve, which tells me how many units the firm wants to produce at any given price, is simply the marginal cost curve above minimum average variable cost. So the firm's supply curve starts right here in the short run, and it's simply the marginal cost curve above minimum average variable cost. If you're a detail-oriented person, which you can tell I'm not really, you could ask me, well, Max, what about prices below P3? What does the supply curve look like? Well, the firm wants to produce 0. So if you wanted to be exact, you could continue the supply curve at 0 right here. Right? But most of us just ignore this little part right here and states that the individual firm's competitive supply curve is simply the marginal cost curve above minimum average variable cost. Because if price is below that, price is less than average variable cost, and the firm should shut down. So this green thing right here, which is a portion of the firm's marginal cost curve, this is your short run firm supply curve for a competitive firm. It says that in the title, but I was just excited, so I want to write it again. Okay? So that's your supply curve. That's the firm's supply curve. Remember individual's demand curve when we had this, whoa, Max, individual demand curve comes from rotating the budget constraint in and out and figuring out where the optimal tangency is in Reese's and Hershey's space. That gave us an individual demand curve. Here, now, I have an individual firm's supply curve. That supply curve comes from the marginal cost curve. Are we going to be interested in the shape of the supply curve? We're going to be very interested in the shape of the supply curve, whether it's flat, whether it's steep, whether it's curved, straight, bent, whatever, right? We're going to care about that a great big deal. Well, what governs the shape of the marginal cost curve, which is the firm's supply curve? You could either the right answers, all of the above are correct, are technology, production function, or marginal product of labor, right? All three are correct. But the shape of the marginal cost curve comes from the production function, which tells you what your marginal product of labor curve looks like, and we've done that translation one for one. So what we've got now is we've got the firm's short-run supply curve, marginal cost above minimum average variable cost, and the shape of it really ultimately depends on production technology. So the shape of supply depends on what your production function looks like. That's pretty exciting. It's starting to run out of steam. So just visualize more excitement on Max's behalf, all right? Okay. So how do we get from one firm's supply curve to a market supply curve, right? So you remember we started the year by saying we're going to really pick apart the demand and supply model, right? And we're going to figure out what shifts around, from your view, that's supply, and this is demand, right? What shifts these things around and what that does to equilibrium, price, and quantity. So we've really now looked under the hood of this individual firm and figured out where the supply curve comes from. It builds up to this moment, right? And now we want to go from one firm to a market supply curve. So the market supply curve is simply the sum at any given price of what an individual firm wants to produce plus what the next firm wants to produce at that price, what the third firm wants to produce at that price, and so on. So the market supply is simply the horizontal sum of individual firms' supply curves. The important thing to realize here, and this is different from the long run, as we'll see very shortly, is in the short run, the number of firms is fixed. Just think of it in terms of Starbucks. If you want to open a Starbucks, you better have an espresso machine. So if you want to open a Starbucks, you need to adjust the level of capital from 0 to 1 units of espresso machine, and you can't do that because you're in the short run and you can't change capital. So in the short run, the number of firms is fixed, versus in the long run, where we're going to get a lot of action and really interesting exam questions, is in the long run, firms can actually enter and exit. So what are you talking about, Max? So think of a firm, or a market, with 2 firms, or do we want to do 3 firms? How much time do we have? 3 firms, okay? So 3 firms. Here we have dollars, here we have Q. So let's say firm 1's supply curve looks like this, right? This is firm 1. Firm 2's supply curve looks like this. Firm 2. And firm 3's supply curve looks like, I don't know, I'm just making this stuff up at this point. And this here is firm 3. Okay, there's supply curve. What these are is firm 1's marginal cost curve above its minimum average variable cost, firm 2's marginal cost curve above its minimum average variable cost, and firm 3's marginal cost curve above its minimum average variable cost curve. Let's put some numbers on here. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Okay, so the market supply curve, again, has dollars on the y-axis and market output on the x-axis. I usually use capital Q for market output and lowercase q for firm output. That just lets me keep track of what I'm talking about. So at price, let's call this 20, 40, 60, 80, move your arrow, 100. Okay. So at the price of $20, what is market supply like? So at $20, firm 1 produces 10 units, okay? Firm 2 also produces 10 units. So I'm going to add to my first firm's 10 units another 10 units from firm 2. So this here is firm 1, this here is firm 2. Firm 3 at that price is willing to bring 20, so I have to add another 20 to my aggregate output. This here is firm 3. So I've got 10, 20, 40. So at a price of $20 per unit, firm 1's willing to supply 10, firm 2's willing to supply 10, firm 3's willing to supply 10, 30, 20. So the whole market at a price of $20 per unit is willing to supply 10 plus 10 plus 20 is 40 units. Let's ramp it up. Let's go to 90 bucks. Okay, so at a price of $90, right here, firm 1 is willing to produce 30. I'm going to get myself in trouble now. And the DSRs are seeing how I got myself in trouble here. Firm 2 is producing 60. All right, so firm 1 is 30. Firm 2 is another 60, so we're at 90. And firm 3 is going to produce another 80. Right, so it's over. It's way out. If I could scroll further. Here. What happened? There we go. We have to go way out there to 30 plus 90 plus 80, so we're at 120. We're at 200 units out here somewhere. Way over there. We could probably use, pick any quantity here, pick a lower one, add these up, and you get an aggregate supply curve that is nice and flat, and over here heads to 200 units at $90. Right, so you're horizontally adding up the supply curves. What I should have done here in this aggregate picture, I should have switched the x-axis so 200 would appear here. I will draw this to scale and put it on P courses. But I think you get the basic intuition here that at each price you just add what quantity each firm is willing to produce, and you put that as the market quantity produced. You can do that at each individual price, and you get the horizontal sum of these individual supply curves, which also means that the aggregate supply curve is much flatter than any individual firm's supply curve. And I'm going to draw you out a nice example to scale. But that's horizontal addition of the individual supply curve. This is what happens when you lecture for 3 hours in a row. These are non-identical firms. Okay, let me explain to you what I just screwed up. So you could think of a setting where each firm is the same, right? Each firm has the same supply curve as firm 1, and then you just add the number of firms times what each firm produces at each given price, and that's your aggregate production quantity. I actually, because I'm so excited about midterm 1 still, went straight to the more complicated example where each individual firm has different supply curves. So these firms differ. I actually think this is much nicer because you see how you horizontally add up across different firms. So these are non-identical firms. For identical firms, you would just have one firm type 1, and then at each price you would just multiply each individual firm's output level at that price times the number of firms in the market, and that would give you aggregate supply. All right? So I'm sorry I went too complicated immediately instead of doing a simple one first. Now, we want to do specific tax? Yeah, we do. Ready? All right. This is pretty awesome. Let's think back to specific taxes for a second. This is what Peter discussed when he taught this lecture. Think of an individual firm. An individual firm has, and I'm going to draw something that I don't want you to draw, okay? Because I'm going to erase it in a second. So an individual firm has an average variable cost curve, and it has a marginal cost curve, okay? What happens to the marginal cost curve if I charge a tax of tau dollars per unit? It shifts up by tau dollars per unit, right? So if I charge the specific tax of tau dollars per unit, my marginal cost curve simply shifts up by the amount of the specific tax. Well, since my marginal cost curve is my supply curve, and since both average variable cost and marginal cost curve shift up by the tax rate, what does this mean for the individual firm supply curve if I charge a specific tax? It just shifts up by tau dollars. So if we just draw our supply curve for my firm, right? Let's say this is the firm's short-run supply curve. What happens with a specific tax? If the specific tax is this big, that exhausting, really. That's a loud yawn. This is short-run supply after tax. Okay, since the specific tax just shifts up your average variable and your marginal cost curve by the tax amount, right? Since the short-run supply curve for the competitive firm is just marginal cost above average variable cost, since you shift both up, it just shifts up the firm's short-run supply curve by the amount of the tax. Now, if you have a number of firms in the market, since you horizontally add the individual supply curves, if this here is your supply curve, so this is S market, since each individual firm's supply curve is shifted up by the dollar amount, the tax amount, and you're adding horizontally, what this means is your market supply curve shifts up by how much, do you think? Starts with tau and ends with nothing, right? It gets shifted up exactly by the tax amount as well. S market after tax. Okay? So if you have a specific tax, the specific tax moves up average variable and marginal cost curve for the individual firm, which of course means that the firm's short-run supply curve is shifted up by the amount of the tax. Since the market supply curve is simply the horizontal sum of the short-run supply curves after and before tax, right? The market supply curve gets shifted up by the amount of the tax. So if you charge a $5 specific tax for the production of widgets or M&Ms or Hershey's or whatever you want, all that does is it shifts up the firm's and the market supply curve by exactly that tax amount. We're going to get a lot of action out of this because what happens when the supply curve shifts around, we get changes in market equilibrium prices and changes in market equilibrium quantities, which is going to be really exciting. But this is a good point to remind ourselves that a specific tax shifts the marginal cost curve, which is now our supply curve, and therefore a specific tax actually shifts the marginal cost of doing business for an individual firm. What I want you to do at home to convince yourself that you understand this, because we've crammed a lot of stuff in today's lecture, is think about what a specific subsidy would do. Right? A specific subsidy is a $1 per unit subsidy on the production of a certain good, or it's like a negative tax. Well, it's not surprising. A negative tax would shift marginal cost and average variable cost curve down. It would shift your supply curve down. So it shifts the individual firm supply curve down by the amount of the specific subsidy, and also shifts the aggregate supply curve down by the specific subsidy. But this is really good practice to fill in the slide to convince yourself what happens to the short-run supply curve due to a tax or a subsidy. I'm not doing this one. Do you guys want to do a quiz quickly or no? All right, how about you write down your name and the last 4 digits on a piece of paper?